Welcome to Eye on America. I'm Michelle Miller. Today, a look at the complexity behind some of our nation's history and traditions. In Washington, D.C., we shine a light on the powerful new stained glass windows at the National Cathedral. And in California, we get a private tour of a century-old monastery in the center of Hollywood. But we begin with a look at a high school course that's become part of our country's culture war. AP African American Studies has received pushback from some conservative politicians since its announcement in 2021. Lisa Ling hears firsthand from students and educators participating in the course.
It's a Thursday morning at Dorsey High School in Los Angeles, and I'm observing a class discussion.
What have you learned? What did you know of African women during slavery?
Unlike any I've ever heard before.
It was entirely okay and permissible to rape a slave, kill a slave, hang a slave, lynch a slave. But if you taught them to read, you were just as bad as a slave.
Led by Donald Singleton, who's been teaching at Dorsey for 26 years, these juniors and seniors are a month in to a national experiment.
The claim is that Africans came to this country skilled. I need evidence.
There was kings and queens, there was trading. They didn't get everything from the Europeans.
Working to earn college credit through a new advanced placement course on African American studies.
Give it up for a step, my gosh.
Like all other AP classes, African American Studies is designed by the nonprofit College Board with help from university professors. The class began taking shape in 2020 after the killing of George Floyd sparked nationwide protests.
The excitement for me is starting in Africa. And for millions and millions of black kids, Africa is born in them.
At Dorsey, where the student body is mostly black and Latino, the hope is that this class will entice a demographic that hasn't sought out AP classes at the same rate as others. How have your students been responding to the class?
My students come in excited, they've done the reading, and they wonder, wow, I never learned this in any of my other classes.
More than 700 U.S. high schools like this one in Columbia, South Carolina, are offering the course this year. And next year, it should be available to any school that wants it.
How do you overcome the bondages that society has placed upon you?
You have to teach yourself, teach others.
When I think back on the way American history was taught to me, for lack of a better term, it was pretty black and white. What I experienced here, though, was so much more nuanced. It was so much more humanized, and some in this country seem to have a problem with that. Florida banned it, writing the course was inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value.
We want education, not indoctrination.
Do you believe you are indoctrinating your kids?
I inculcate my kids with the idea that you're just as beautiful, just as brilliant as anyone else. That's my job every day.
You really think of them as your kids.
All of them are my kids, nothing to do with race or ethnicity.
Not long after Florida banned the class, the College Board amended the curriculum, removing content on systemic racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the push for reparations. The curriculum that is being taught today, do you believe it's been sanitized?
Yes, I do.
Though the College Board said the changes were part of their regular development process, some educators like Alberto Carvalho, superintendent of LA Unified School District, believe the organization acquiesced to political pressure.
If you want to really learn about the history of the African American experience, you cannot leave out or sanitize slavery or the civil rights movements or the fact that our nation has criminalized activities resulting in disproportionate numbers of people of color being imprisoned.
The curriculum is intended to be a roadmap, and teachers are free to introduce additional topics.
Can I talk about Black Lives Matter? Of course I can. Can I talk about reparations in California? Of course I can. Just because it's not going to be tested on the exam, there's nothing that says you're not allowed to teach about these subjects.
And despite the modifications, the class remains completely banned in Florida. In all, 18 states have passed laws restricting how race can be taught in K-12 schools.
We cannot perpetuate a lie to our students and push this propaganda, leftist agenda, teaching our kids to hate America and hate one another.
I wanted to know if the Dorsey students were aware they were in the middle of a political firestorm.
Do you all know that this class that you're sitting in right now is considered pretty controversial?
Yes.
Do you think that it should be considered controversial?
This isn't a political class. This isn't like choosing sides. It's history that everybody should know.
I sat down with a group of them after class to hear more. What compelled all of you to want to take this class?
I need to learn more about my people, my history. It's the truth.
Hassan Wright, a senior, rejected claims the class stoked racial division.
If there was a class that was deliberately telling students to hate white people and hate this country, I would be against that class too. I don't think we should teach hatred of any kind.
And junior Jordan Love told me it changed the way he thought about Black history.
There's a major difference between having somebody tell you that you're the ancestor of a slave family and having somebody tell you that you're the ancestor of an advanced civilization.
Knowledge is power.
Is that what people are afraid of?
Yes.
Yeah.
They want to keep us not knowing the truth.
If we have that knowledge, we're able to speak out. Our voices are our strongest weapon that we can use.
There are some who say that education should not be about empowerment or advocacy. It should be education.
If it's not about empowerment, why do you say the Pledge of Allegiance? Why do we teach about the Declaration of Independence? Why do we teach about the Constitution? Isn't that empowerment?
We stay in California for our next story, where one tiny town with fewer than 100 people has rejected calls to become part of the state capital. Marley Ginter of our CBS Sacramento station, KOVR, speaks to residents fighting to preserve their unique heritage.
The town of Freeport along the Sacramento River dates back to the gold rush days.
It's a unique area that needs to be preserved.
Bob Lake has lived in this town known as the gateway to the Delta for 25 years.
There's a tremendous amount of history.
Its name stems from some pioneering merchants trying to avoid sending money to Sacramento.
Because they were free of taxes, it was a free port.
Today, there's only about 100 residents still left, but there's still a drive to preserve the town's heritage. Residents are working with the county to build 2 monument interpretive signs, which will help tell the town's tale.
It'll look great. It'll be an introduction to the history and the gateway to the Delta.
A plaque will include information on the iconic Freeport Bridge, which is nearly 100 years old and is designed by the same man who built the Golden Gate Bridge. And what is now Highway 160 was once known as the Victory Highway, built after the First World War that ran all the way to New York, with trees along the path honoring fallen soldiers.
This was the first highway that went across the entire country.
The once rural town now seeing new development being built right up to its border. Years ago, the city of Sacramento offered to merge the town into the city limits.
And the people of Freeport rejected it. Don't want to be a part of Sacramento. We have a unique history here.
A history they hope will be told by some new signs.
I don't think very many people understand the history, and they should.
Coming up, why one of the military's most revered ceremonies is getting a necessary update. This is Eye on America. Welcome back. A 2022 Army investigation found that the horses carrying fallen soldiers to their final resting place in Arlington National Cemetery were being improperly cared for. David Martin introduces us to the 2 women whose work helped improve the well-being of the animals involved in one of the military's oldest traditions.
The horse-drawn caisson at Arlington National Cemetery is one of this nation's most solemn and majestic rituals. But back at the stable, watch what happened to a horse named George.
When I touched George's neck, he fell to his knees, which is a very abnormal response in any horse, and I've never encountered such a painful horse.
Major Beth Biles is the veterinarian for the horses.
So George basically just buckled under the pain?
He did. It was shocking.
CBS News obtained photos of other horses with scars from wearing ill-fitting harnesses and saddles while pulling a 2,600-pound caisson.
They were all suffering from severe musculoskeletal injuries, neck pain.
They were supposed to work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, but some ended up working 6 weeks straight. Soldiers with limited training didn't recognize the problem, and higher-ups weren't listening.
Educating the chain of command on how to take the appropriate steps was a challenge.
Did you have a hard time getting through?
Initially, yes.
Then 2 horses died, and this Army investigation finally declared conditions unsafe. The Army brought in hearses to give the horses a full year to recover. They were sent to rehab for therapies like cold water soaks for their aching limbs.
There was a lot of work to be done.
Monique Hovey had been brought in as the new herd manager and started getting rid of saddles whose design dated back to World War I.
So not only can we cause pain along their spine from how narrow this is, but then there was a rub happening on this horse.
This sounds like very basic stuff.
Yes, it's basic.
Now there are new saddles and some new horses. Hovey calls the horses soldiers without voices, but George said it all in that 10-second video. Here he is now, a year later, at the rehab center.
George is a case of a success story.
George will never go back to pulling a caisson, but horse-drawn funerals are scheduled to resume next year.
I do not ever want to bring the horses back if they can't be taken care of appropriately. I do fear that we might revert back to where we were.
We stay in our nation's capital, where another institution is making important changes, too. The National Cathedral recently unveiled new stained glass windows, replacing images of Confederate leaders that were displayed there until 2017. Adriana Diaz speaks to the artist about the story behind these powerful new portrayals.
If the walls could talk at Washington's National Cathedral, they'd recount some of our nation's most profound moments.
The best father a son or daughter could have.
Where we're reminded our leaders are only human. But these walls have also upheld a stain in stained glass. Tributes to Confederate generals Robert E. Lee, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, and their flag. They were removed in 2017. Their replacements were revealed.
I couldn't miss it. Wanted to be here to witness it.
I've never seen anything like it, so I'm like, wow.
It's a celebration of the Black experience, a still image that captures the kinetic energy of protesting in the pursuit of justice.
It is pretty brilliant, pretty bright.
It's glowing. It's the work of renowned Chicago artist Kerry James Marshall, whose pieces can go for millions. His price for this? $18.65, a nod to slavery's end.
I think these windows simply announce themselves to the passerby in a way that most of the other windows in the cathedral don't.
Also, unlike the other windows here, there's a wheelchair, no faces, and...
In a church, you're so used to looking up at the windows and seeing white skin. And seeing black skin here, it's almost like you have to do a double take.
I don't think these windows exclude anybody. I think the activity and what they're engaged in is something that everybody can partake in.
There's a different light that comes out of that bay than comes out of any of the other bays here at the cathedral.
Randy Hollerith, Dean of the National Cathedral, says not everyone agreed with the change.
There was a lot of resistance that we were removing history. Part of what we tried to do was to have those conversations, and then just to know that we were doing what we thought was absolutely the best thing.
Below are words by poet Elizabeth Alexander, who performed at President Obama's first inauguration.
For a lot of people, poetry goes over their heads.
I do know that a lot of people get nervous around poetry, but poetry's just words and we all have them. The final line of the poem, "May this portal be where the light comes in," that can illuminate the beauty of the past and also sometimes the untruths of the past.
Funeral services are held at Washington Cathedral.
Their art will live on in a place that serves as a spiritual home for the nation, where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his last sermon.
The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
A permanence that leaves this poet speechless.
They will outlive me by a very, 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 very long measure. And what that reminds me of is the power of art. And what that means is actually beyond words for me right now.
Carrie, I see you nodding.
To really make a contribution to the transformation of the nation towards the goals that it had established and set for itself, liberty and justice for all. I don't think I could have asked for anything more meaningful to have done in my life.
Ahead, a monastery surrounded by movie stars. We'll take you there next. We close our show in a surprising spot right in the heart of Hollywood. The Monastery of the Angels was once home to an order of Dominican nuns. And while A-list benefactors helped support it for decades, the site now faces an uncertain future. I visited the City of Angels to see how the century-old haven is forging a way forward. Just below the Hollywood sign, a few blocks up the street from Sunset Boulevard, there's a place that stands in contradiction to Hollywood.
Welcome to Monastery of the Angels.
The Monastery of the Angels, where Sister Maria Christine invited us in.
May we? So we certainly can.
Is cloistered, rooted in a 13th century religious tradition founded in France by a monk named Dominique Guzman.
This is the home of the nuns, and normally the public is never allowed in here.
I.e. me.
You.
And all of my friends.
And all of your friends. As you notice, there's no doorknob, so from the public side, you can't enter.
For most of the past 99 years, Dominican nuns have lived here and rarely stepped off monastery property. That's really 4 acres of prime Hollywood real estate donated by a copper tycoon.
We keep silence most of the day. We'll eat in common refectory. Everything is in common. This, when you need the sisters, you can... Yeah.
May I?
Yes. They would ring this in order to call the sisters to prayer. Because as a cloistered nuns, we would come to choir, to chapel 7 times a day for prayers.
This is in the heart of Hollywood.
And you don't hear a thing, do you?
Not a thing. The quiet stillness has long been noticed nonetheless by neighbors who have been allowed to visit the limited public parts of the monastery. Even movie stars became monastery regulars.
Like who? Well, we had famous people like Jane Wyman, Doris Day, Bob and Dolores Hope, Bing Crosby.
And Hollywood really supported this space.
They did. It was their escape. They'd come over here to just have that quiet, prayerful recollection. So the sisters said, we are here to pray for Hollywood. We're here to pray for the movie industry, for the morality.
Imagine how that went.
Well, you know, you could say prayer can move mountains, but sometimes you have mountains that you can't move very well. You pray for Hollywood, and yet it's
still Hollywood.
It's still Hollywood. Yeah, what do I say?
Hollywood and the nuns found many ways to embrace each other. Special showbiz relics ended up with the sisters for safekeeping. For example, this piano was used to compose Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical, Oklahoma. And when Jane Wyman was not winning the Oscar for Best Actress, she made sure another statue graced the grounds where the sisters prayed. But prayers and famous benefactors can't pay all the bills. Life as it has been known here has ended. The sisters all moved to other monasteries.
But vocations aren't plentiful like they used to be. And we saw our aging numbers escalating and not the young. So there was a gap in between. And we said we can be more useful by supporting our other monasteries and then repurposing our monastery here.
I would imagine there are quite a few real estate speculators who would love to get their hands on this property.
Oh, yes, yes. I have a whole box full of letters that I've received. Makes us very unique.
But Sister Maria Christine isn't selling. The Monastery of the Angels is more than just a fabulous piece of land with special touches.
The exercise room. Dear benefactor said, you know, we need to put a pool in here where the sisters can exercise properly.
This is quite a gift.
Isn't this?
Or is it 10 decades of memories left in Sister Maria Christine's care? There's centuries of a religious practice to preserve somehow.
And back here was the sewing room.
Gone is the sewing room where sisters made vestments.
We also would make rosaries.
Can you teach me? They won't be making rosary beads here anymore either. Like that?
Maybe we have better get you to knitting instead of crocheting.
So what is the plan?
The plan is probably still in the eyes of God. We have many people with many ideas. Some of it has to do with a more professional health care, or is it a school?
So this is the bakery? One thing sure to be preserved is the pumpkin bread with the sisters' own special recipe. Delicious. A popular commodity that's still being baked, sold, and since the pandemic, shipped all across the country. As for the valuable property, the Dominicans are not letting it go and are determined that the Monastery of the Angels' future be very much like its past, a place under the sign that strives to make Hollywood a better place in its own deliberately quiet way. For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News. I'm Michelle Miller. Thank you for watching Eye on America.